Welcome to everyone. This is the presentation of the first chapter of our book, A New Principles of Economics, the Science of Markets.
Using the example of Imperial China, we will identify the critical constituents of markets. These are marketplaces, and their material and institutional infrastructure, and the market system formed by interconnecting markets driven by people's actions. We will further look at some key controversies over markets in normative terms, such as regarding inequality, and finally distinguish between markets and capitalism.
But what actually are markets?
The simplest definition is that markets are an emergent social technology that enables economic exchange among many people.
I see. So it seems that markets are a relatively recent phenomenon?
Not at all. That is why we look at China. China has had flourishing markets for more than 2 millennia. Even without modern technology and the institutions that had emerged in Europe, Chinese life has been shaped by markets since early times. And we can go beyond that. Markets are ubiquitous among most human societies, past and present. That is because they essentially form communities of mutual advantage, a concept that we will explore in much more detail later in the book.
So we can say China developed capitalism much earlier than Europe, and that's what the Chinese Communist Party overthrew?
No, one of the reasons we study Imperial China is to show that capitalism is not the only form of market economy. Many economists use the terms market economy and capitalism interchangeably, assuming that modern capitalism represents an advanced and superior market economy. However, when we look at China today, economists struggle to determine the exact nature of its economic system. This can be traced back to its historical roots. Let's take a closer look at this. Carsten, you have studied the Chinese economy and culture for 4 decades. What was your most significant insight?
Well, old China can indeed be called an empire of marketplaces. This was recognized through the many Chinese names of townships that contain the character Zhen, which means marketplace. On our slide, you can see the Qingming Scroll, one of the most famous Chinese paintings. It was created by the artist Zhang Zedong, who lived during the Song dynasty 1,000 years ago. This painting shows the bustling life at such a marketplace. It is worth noting that Qingming is one of the most important holidays in China, where families visit the graves of their ancestors. However, this does not prevent them from doing business. The scroll also highlights a fundamental fact about markets, which is the division of labor and the necessity of exchange.
Did markets emerge spontaneously?
During Zheng's lifetime, markets had already grown out of government control, which had still been strong during the previous Tang dynasty. Marketplaces resulted from investments by various groups, such as townships, powerful local families, or temples, and often were devoted to unique trades, such as bamboo.
This observation highlights an important aspect of markets. They are physical structures. While a medieval market and the modern exchange may differ significantly, they both require physical infrastructure, no matter whether in the form of market stalls or servers that power the internet. In addition, markets entail social networks. They are the physical places where individuals come together to communicate, negotiate, and finalize deals. Even in virtual markets, people utilize social media to interact with one another and facilitate exchange.
Exactly. That is why we can learn a great deal about modern markets when considering a historical case such as China. There are universals of markets that apply everywhere and at any time.
Perhaps the most fundamental of these universals are the division of labor and specialization. They are both enabled and deepened by market exchange.
For a long time, anthropologists believed that traditional agricultural societies were self-sufficient and did not have significant economic connections with other communities. However, Economic historians have shown that there were indeed deep divisions of labor in some of those societies, including China.
Looking at the Jinming scroll again, it depicts many different trades. We can see craftspersons selling their products. Farmers are shown selling food. Additionally, various services such as transportation are also illustrated. Some villages specialized in producing specific goods such as paper or straw hats. Traders often organized this specialization by exchanging certain inputs for finished products.
Some historians have therefore labeled old China as commercial capitalism. Although the use of the term capitalism is questionable in this context, it does make the key point that trading and not investing in factories was the driver of economic growth and change. Overall, we can speak of old China as a market society.
What exactly does that mean?
Marketplaces were centers of social life. For example, Chinese marriage rules prescribed kinship group exogamy, meaning that since many villages were even one extended kinship group sharing a surname, say Chen, they had to find brides in other villages. So the marketplace was a marriage market as well, including specialized matchmakers.
You mentioned that temples were often centers of market activities, and hence market played a crucial role in organizing religious activities. In modern economics, it is widely recognized that asymmetric information and deficits in trust are critical issues in sustaining markets. As exchange circles expand, the probability of cheating increases, leading to lower market transparency. Joint shared religious activities, which is commonly referred to as social capital, can help reinforce trust and transparency in market transactions.
Indeed, the key figures in Chinese markets were intermediaries who lent their reputation to bring others together in exchange and transmitted trusted information about market conditions. There were even specialized brokers for grave sites. Interestingly, the government also issued licenses to brokers to regulate markets.
I think what we said so far refers to goods and services. But how about the most essential resource in traditional agriculture, land? Were there land markets?
In China, land was considered as the only means of livelihood and wealth until the 19th century. Most of the land was found by family farms, especially in the highly productive south, where they mostly worked as tenants. The villagers tried to keep the land for their livelihood, and the government restricted the accumulation of large landholdings.
China's population has significantly increased over the past 500 years. In the 19th century, it had already exceeded 400 million people. According to economic theory, the population growth should have resulted in a scarcity of land relative to labor, causing production to become more labor-intensive. Did that happen in China?
In principle, yes. But a specific feature of labor markets in the traditional Chinese economy was the emergence of family units as a dominant economic unit across most sectors. This shift occurred because families provided better opportunities to monitor and incentivize labor efforts. As a result, there was no demand for capital formation and larger-scale organization. Indeed, larger economic units retreated from economic life.
The family units in ancient China functioned within a market system. The economic geography of old China was influenced by the logistics of pre-industrial transportation technology, which facilitated the integration of local and regional markets. Market integration rested on the fundamental mechanism of arbitrage, which involves buying goods cheaply and reselling them at a higher price. An army of traders, ranging from small-time peddlers to wealthy and influential rice and salt merchants, acted as intermediaries between producers and consumers, often over vast distances.
As the population grew, local and regional markets emerged, creating more towns and a denser landscape. Anthropologist G. William Skinner demonstrated 70 years ago that this growth pattern results in a hexagonal or honeycomb-shaped topographical structure, which minimizes transport distances. This was the basic pattern in Imperial China. The diagrams shown here, created initially by Skinner, demonstrate the similarity between the actual map and the theoretical predictions. Interestingly, the respective infrastructure was provided by both the imperial government and private traders. In the former case, political interests were often prevalent. For example, the stabilization of the supply of rice, which most famously led to the construction of the Imperial Grand Canal from Yangzhou to Beijing. At the same time, compared to Europe, public engagement remained relatively low, which is sometimes seen as an important reason of China's relative decline since the 18th century. Infrastructure development promoted the formation of large cities as administrative centers, but also kept urbanization relatively low, because small towns were integrated all over the country.
Economists often emphasize the critical role of institutions for markets, such as the rule of law and a reliable supply of money. Did the imperial government provide such institutions?
China diverged from the Western historic trajectory in several ways, and some economic historians argue that this divergence explains why China never entered the stage of industrialization. One key difference is that China did not develop any state-governed commercial and civil law. Instead, markets were regulated by customary trade rules, which the courts recognized, but which were mainly enforced through self-organized groups, such as merchant and native place associations. And what about the use of money?
Well, the government minted copper coins for daily use, and for some time even paper money circulated. At the same time, China is a notable example of the influence of international capital flow. Due to the significant inflows of silver through the triangular trades between Europe, China, and the Americas, silver dollars became the standard measure for taxation and wealth accumulation. As a result, China did not develop a more advanced financial system that could have supported capital accumulation.
Let us now have a look at how the government and other influential actors in China viewed markets from a normative perspective. The scholar officials of the imperial administration held a nuanced perspective when it came to markets and economic policies. While they were worried about the negative effects of wealth accumulation in society, they also recognized the importance of lowering the tax burden on the population. As a result, the government implemented a low tax regime to achieve this goal, much lower than in Europe at the advent of industrialization.
Did China have their own tradition of economics that informed such views?
Over 2,000 years ago, Chinese scholars had developed a comprehensive understanding of how markets could impact general welfare and the role of government in regulating them. The debate on salt and iron was a famous discussion that confronted liberal Confucians and authoritarian legalists who had opposing views on whether the government should enforce state monopolies on the market. Corruption was a significant concern for both groups. The legalists were apprehensive about the accumulation of private wealth in these sectors. It could weaken the economic foundation of a strong government. On the other hand, the Confucians believed that such monopolies would promote corruption among government officials.
This leaves us with a final topic, namely the question why, unlike in Western Europe, China did not develop a full-scale capitalist economy in the late 18th and 19th century. One of the main reasons why China did not develop modern industrial production was the government's weaker fiscal state compared to European states, especially Britain, which had colonized some parts of the world. As a result, China did not invest sufficiently in infrastructure and military capabilities, eventually leading to the empire's collapse under the Western imperialism. Also, modern financial institutions did not develop in China as they did in Europe. For example, government debt was not institutionalized in China, whereas in Europe, war finance helped develop a range of related financial instruments and ultimately capital markets.
In my opinion, markets played a crucial role in the adaptation to the availability of natural resources. In the case of China, the key factors were energy prices, particularly in the form of coal, and the price of human labor. As evident from the data in the tables in comparison to Britain, labor was much cheaper than coal in China. Therefore, there was no economic incentive to replace labor with capital.
Let us now summarize the main insights of this chapter. First of all, we have seen that the notion of a market economy is not coextensive with capitalism. Capitalism is only a specific historical form of market economy. The economy of late Imperial China is a case of a mature, non-capitalist market economy. Furthermore, old China developed a rich physical infrastructure of marketplaces and market towns, shaping her geography and undergirding the regional integration of the market system. Markets permeated all social domains, which is why we can call old China a market society.
The point that is particularly important for our further argument is that markets were sustained by a wide range of institutions, such as property rights, contracts, and intermediation. At the same time, they were embedded in social networks. Markets enabled comprehensive economic specialization, grounding in the household and family as key units of economic agency. Lastly, we also reflected on differences between the market economy of Imperial China and Western capitalism. We highlighted important institutional differences, such as the absence of fully fledged finance, but also the weakness of the fiscal state. Finally, there were different resource endowments, with China's abundance of labor providing disincentives for developing capitalist forms of organization.
This brings us to the end of this presentation. No doubt, China provides a fascinating case study for markets, spanning a long period of time. We revisit the topic of markets in the next chapter, when we discuss economics as the science of markets. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.